Welcome to another episode of the Heber Valley Life Podcast, where we share the stories of the people shaping the community we call home. Today's guest is someone who plays a critical role behind the scenes in the day-to-day operation of our city. While many people see elected officials making policy decisions, it's the city manager who works to turn those decisions into action. Joining me today is Matt Brower, city manager for Heber City. Matt oversees city operations, working closely with the mayor and city council, and helps guide our community through the opportunities and challenges that come with growth. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Rachel, good morning. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad to have you. You know, many residents hear the title city manager, but they don't really fully understand what that role is. Can you walk us through a day-to-day in your life?
I don't think there's 2 days that are actually the same. The one common denominator, though, are meetings. This week, the 10-hour day, I'm probably 9.5 hours of meetings, so kind of brutal. But a city manager. So in Heber, we are what's called a council manager form of government. What that means is that the council leads, they set the policy, they hire the city manager, me in this case, to effectuate that policy, bring it about, as well as run all the operations of the city. And that can be daunting because most businesses like Starbucks, they sell coffee. RC Willys, they sell furniture. Well, in Heber, we do police and roads and parks and water and sewer, and it goes on and on and on. So we have to be experts with a lot of crafts.
Yeah, what's impressive, though, is, you went on and got your master's degree, Florida State, but then spent a career really learning this trade through some great mentors. You didn't just stay in one place, which I think is valuable because it gives you different experiences. Tell me about those different locations and what brought you back to Utah.
So I left Utah after graduating from the University of Utah, and I got a job with Cape Coral Hospital, Cape Coral, Florida. I was working for the hospital system, and I thought my career would be in healthcare, working for hospitals. It wasn't long after I got there that the hospital announced layoffs. The administrators had embezzled millions of dollars. They had signaled layoff. I knew I was going to be one of the first guys out, as I was one of the last guys in. And so having residency in Florida, I applied to a bunch of schools. I was fortunately accepted to Florida State, the ASU School of Public Administration, one of the top administration schools in the country, where I spent 2 years learning the trade, learning the craft. But after I graduated, I got my first gig in Newnan, Georgia. Newnan is a very special town. It's called the City of Homes because most of the homes in the city predate the Civil War, meaning that when General Sherman came through, he spared the city because at that time it was used as a field hospital for both the Confederate and Union armies. Beautiful downtown, gorgeous downtown, historic downtown, amazing. I was there for about 3 years, and then I got the gig in Santa Clara, Utah. I heard a rumor recently that I worked for Santa Clara, California. Not only have I never worked there, but I've never been there. So I'm not sure that came up. At Santa Clara, when I was there, about 8,000 population, very small community, great community for me to get my hands around the city management business. I was there for about 10 years. I was there during the famous floodings on the Santa Clara River, where we lost 44 homes to the flooding. From there, I had a friend who became the city manager in Ocala, Florida. And I called him, Ricky Horst, and congratulated him. Ocala is a big city, and it's a big job. And he called me back the next day and said, Matt, I need help. Will you come with me? I said, let's do it. At that time, Ocala was a mess. It had the highest electric rates in the state of Florida. Its pension programs for its police, fire, general employees were funded at a level of about 44%. It had a structural deficit of about $11 million. Remember, this time, 2008, 2009, is the Great Recession, and so had some really big issues. But I left Ocala in 2014 and became city manager of Lincoln, California. I was there for about 3.5, 4 years. I saw the advertisement for Heber come up, and I thought, that's the gig I want. That's the gig I want. And so I'm here.
It's amazing, though. Coast to coast.
Yes.
Florida to California, back to Utah. What was the draw for Utah? You grew up in the Salt Lake area. Did you come up here as a child? Was it the mountains? What was it that you saw that post and you thought, that's where I really want to be?
So yeah, I was born and raised in Utah. I went to Conway High School, went to the University of Utah. I spent a lot of time on Wasatch Track, hiking and hunting and fishing. In fact, one of my earliest memories is of my dad taking me deer hunting up near Red Creek. And coming through here, I remember stopping at a gas station in the hub intersection to fill up the ice chest with ice and milk and snacks and stuff. But every summer I hike between 300 to 400 miles in the area. Sunrise and the sunsets are unparalleled. The quality of life is second to none. Even with the growth, the quality of life is second to none. And this is home.
It's interesting as you talked about the different communities that you were able to work in. And so many of them had natural disasters like Santa Clara or unprecedented growth or tax rates that were challenging. And you had to come in and I've seen that with your work. You're a problem solver. You're willing to get your hands in there and figure out what the problems are and then find solutions. And I appreciate that. I'm curious, though, about some leadership. You are really involved in your staff. And I have seen you in action, really working to empower your staff to step up and become leaders. But how did that come about? Who were your mentors? Where did you find that role model that you wanted to say, I want to be like that person?
I had a number of great role models. Dick Bolin, who was the city manager in Newton, Georgia. Ricky Horst, who I worked for in Ocala, Florida. Carol Levitt, who was a great friend. So some great mentors. Ricky Horst, when he invited me to work for him in Ocala, he assembled what he called his cabinet. It was people from around the country, the most talented, capable people I'd ever worked with. They could move mountains to get things done. And what I learned is that you have to surround yourself with people that are better than you. I might be a 7, but I'm going to hire 8s, 9s, and 10s. Why? Because they're going to know more than me. If I miss something, they're going to catch it, and they're going to have the experience to deal with it.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's a true leader, though, is being willing to bring those people around and make you stronger because of who you're with. You have a fairly young staff, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think that's why those leadership skills that you are passing on to them has become so valuable in the last few years. You've implemented some great leadership and director responsibilities. You've passed budget responsibilities onto your directors. Talk to me about your thinking in that and why you want them to be empowered to make those budget decisions.
Well, I tell you, when I worked in Newton, Georgia, I worked for Dick Bolin. Great guy, old school. He was the general 1,000-follower model, which meant that he told you what to do and you asked how high, right? How high am I to jump? And there's value to that leadership trait, but it seems to break down when the leader leads because no one's been trained, no one's been developed to handle and keep the ship afloat. And so what I learned from those experiences is that you have to empower staff. You have to mentor them, you have to develop them, and you have to rely upon them to get most of the work done. If I do everything, and if I could do everything myself, I would need a staff. But I don't know everything, and I'm incapable of doing it all, so I have to rely on staff. And therefore, I rely upon staff that are smarter, more capable than I am. And that's the key to success, is relying upon great people.
Yeah, it's so true. I want to transition to the elected officials. So I was an elected official for one term, 4 years. And it's such an interesting balance because the elected officials set the legislation.
Yep.
And then you and your staff are forced to implement.
That's correct.
And what I appreciated was early on, you started these early retreats where we spent 2 days defining priorities and then putting budget to those priorities. And I don't know if prior to your time here that was something that the city, a process that the city went through.
It wasn't.
And it became very clear to me that those budget priorities helped establish a vision for the direction that Heber was going. And then we also did the Envision Heber 2050 program, which was basically taking the general plan and 4 or 5 years we spent going through that process.
A long time.
Because I started on the steering committee in 2019 as just a regular citizen. And I think that's what prompted me to run for city council because I saw the opportunity to serve my community, but also saw the vision of implementing some of these ideas that we had talked about for over a year. on the steering committee and then implementing that. But it's a tricky place to be where the elected official makes a decision, but then you have to implement it. And it's not your decision. It's not your plan. It's something that was vetted and came through the public process. I mean, how do you do this for 25 years, taking these policies and then bringing them to light?
But first, in my business, one must understand that council leads and staff follows. And council leads by setting the priorities, setting the policies that staff is going to be shouldered upon to complete and to carry out. And so when I got to Heber, there was no such exercise of the council convening and discussing big issues that are over the horizon, things that we've not even contended with yet. And through the retreat process that we have every January, what you were involved in, it was oftentimes 2.5 days, 2 days. Council was shouldered with trying to figure out what the priorities are going to be, not just the next fiscal year, but the next few years. And so through that very hard work, those discussions, a majority of the council agreed that these were going to be our policies. These are going to be our priorities. And then after the retreat, staff then convenes and identifies how we're going to implement those priorities, how we're going to build them into the budget. That way they can be funded, they can be carried out. But, emphasize council leads, staff follows. And council, it's important that a majority of the council sets that policy, not one individual, not two individuals, but a majority of the council sets that policy in that direction. And of course, as I mentioned, it's up to staff to execute on it as efficiently, as effectively as they possibly can.
I found it interesting coming in as an elected official. I had experience working with city government and worked as a county employee, but it wasn't until I became an elected official I understood the pressure that elected officials are under, because they're both representing the public, but they're also trying to navigate this forward motion. And we often had people come to the meetings and be upset about a direction.
Yep.
And you feel this pressure. And yet, once that majority decision is made, you have to move forward. I'm curious, how do you do that day after day where sometimes you've got people that are criticizing and unhappy, but yet that's what the election process is all about.
That's right.
Is putting people in place to make those tough decisions.
That's right. I'll give you an example. Santa Clara, Utah, in 2006, 2007, we did a major streetscape through what's called Old Highway 91, the old roadway that goes through the heart of downtown Santa Clara. And this is going to be a comprehensive streetscape. Spent years designing, years talking about. And we got closer and closer to the construction. People became more vocal, began pushing back hard on the council. And I was a little bit nervous that council was going to acquiesce and they were going to change course. And it couldn't say did. Because when that project was done, the same community members that were upset, thinking that that project was going to destroy the city, destroy its small town feel, were the biggest advocates, thinking we could not understand or see just how great this is going to be. And if you've been to Santa Clara since about 2006, 2007, go, because it's got one of the prettiest, most elegant downtowns in the state of Utah.
But it takes that hard work and that commitment to those hard decisions. I think that relates to the water and sewer project that Heber City undertook early in my term.
Yep.
Very expensive project and had a lot of what felt like hardship that we were putting on those neighbors and families that had to deal with mud and people tearing up their roads for a long time, especially the one winter that we decided to proceed through winter and run. So it was a lot of snow. But how is it that there's this misunderstanding of what your role is compared to council, and how do we help the public understand those different roles?
That's a tough one, and that's an issue that faces every city up in it. In fact, probably most cities throughout the country. Going back to the Central Heber Water and Sewer Line project, that was a 4-year, $50 million project. And thank goodness that council, the mayor, had the will to see that through. As a city manager, I was in homes that had sewer in their basements. I was in homes that get flooded twice by water backups. The system was in some cases 80 years old and was failing. We found wooden water lines in the downtown. It was time and something had to be done. And luckily that the council had the political will to see this thing through. And yes, there were challenges. A project this big is going to have challenges, but we had a great team trying to resolve them as quickly as possible. And fortunately, the council stayed the course and we got it done. But, in council manager form of governments, as I mentioned, councils lead, staff follows. Um, Part of my MO is I try to be as visible as I can and as approachable as I can. In fact, there's probably few town events I'm not participating in, so I'm very visible. In some cases, maybe more visible than some council members are because they're busy at life as well. And so I think it's maybe a combination of people just not understanding my MO, trying to be very visible and approachable, or I'm seen everywhere. It's making the impression to people that, I'm more involved and have more say in what happens than I actually do.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Having grown up in this area, uh, we are feeling the growth pressures.
Mhm.
And even as a council member, I felt like every meeting had so many heavy decisions. You were really, you felt strongly about general plans.
Mhm.
While I was there, we approved a master plan for the Jordan Ridge, the largest residential development I would say probably if this valley will ever see with 5,000 units. We took on the master plan for the airport. We took on Envision Heber 2050. Why do you like to do all these hard projects, Matt? Why is it that you're like, these are things that need to happen? We're going to do it.
So I'm not a maintenance manager. I'm not going to come and just occupy seats and get a paycheck. I love moving the needle. I love seeing things get done. And I think the best analogy is it's a sports analogy. I love football, so I'll use a football analogy. Imagine a football team that doesn't have a playbook, that doesn't understand what they're up against and the team they're playing on Sunday. How effective do you think they're going to be in being competitive or even having a chance to win that game? They're going to get blown out. And the reality is, you can, as Colonel Powell once said, you can plan, prepare, and be disciplined, or you can get rolled. And this city is too awesome, too great to get rolled. We needed a plan. That's where Envision Heber 2050 came from. When we updated that plan, the old one was nearly 20 years old and did not reflect the growth pressures that were happening. In fact, if you go back to 1990, we had a population of under 5,000 people. It's now over 20,000. That's a 4 times increase in about 35 years. The older plan did not recognize the pressure we were facing. And so we had to have a playbook. We had to have a plan that would help us logically and empirically decide what we wanted to do. We can't put our heads in the pillow and hope it doesn't happen. Oh, can you imagine the mess that we would be in? And so we had to have a plan. We had to have that playbook. And again, fortunately, council had the will to see that through and see that plan adopted. In fact, that's the plan right here.
Yeah.
It's the Envision Heber 2050.
We've done a lot of meetings going through that plan.
Absolutely. In fact, this isn't my plan. This is the public's plan. At no other time in the city's history did we do more outreach. We had more public meetings, public hearings. We had surveys. In fact, we got an award for how well this plan was done. Again, this isn't my plan. This is the council's plan that was based upon the input we received from the community.
But let's talk about the name of it because I think sometimes people see that 2050 and they don't understand. It really is a guidebook. How we're supposed to go in the direction we're supposed to go. One of the things that I was so surprised about having served on the steering committee in 2019 was I felt like once this plan was approved, it allowed developers because now that we had a plan in place, they now came to city council and said, okay, we're ready to build.
Yes.
And we felt that pressure. When I stepped in 2020, Sawmill had already been approved. Truro Mill had already been approved. Even the commercial development of London Springs had already been approved in 2018. And then, of course, Jordan Ridge, Coyote Ridge, a lot of annexation requests. And I think maybe that's where the community was like, this feels fast and furious. And that's where you're seeing a lot of frustration because they feel like the floodgates have been open and there's no control. Let's talk about why this plan was so important to allow really a mechanism for as we move forward and why that built up pressure is here now and why moratoriums don't work.
So a lot in that, saying not in packet. First and foremost, this is the playbook. This is the plan. Secondly, the gates of growth begin in the 1990s. In fact, 2002 Olympics spurred that on. We're now at 20,000, and projections are that we're going to grow another 15,000 or so by 2050. And so the growth's here, and the growth's going to keep coming. People probably see it more now because we're getting to a critical mass, and it's more visible. You look on Highway 40, you look off to the east, you see the North Village area, all that grading. Those are developments that were approved some years ago. They're now being realized, but those were approved in conjunction with this plan. And so I get it. I don't like the growth either. But I'm shouldered with the responsibility of seeing the plan through and complying with state law. And that's another variable here, is the state legislature sets the ground rules for all of our land use decisions. And ironically, the state legislature is led by whom right now? Developers. And so a lot of those rules have been made easier for developers. So I understand the floodgates growth began in the 90s. It's been accelerating since then. We need to have a plan. This is it. People are upset of the growth. I get it. I don't like it either. I remember hiking out into the North Village with my dogs, and nothing's there. Now we have a lot there.
Yeah. Several hundred homes are now in it.
Several hundred homes, and more to come. But we have property rights. We have the state legislature. We have a plan to help navigate us through it. And again, we could put our head under the pillow, hope that things happen, but great things don't happen by happenstance. It happens with a plan.
But that word moratorium, there's so many people that say, just stop. Just take a beat. Let the infrastructure catch up. Let's talk through that, because that was something that I often felt like I was trying to educate what the parameters around a moratorium are and why it doesn't stop growth.
Moratoriums, quite frankly, only exacerbate the growth because you're delaying it, you're pausing it. So that pressure behind the dam is building up. So understand, Utah law, you can put a moratorium in place for 6 months. Now you can continue that for another 6 months. You have to make findings to substantiate that moratorium. If you fail to make those findings, I assure you that the developer is going to have you in court, and the judge is going to overturn that pretty dang quick. And fortunately for Heber, from my perspective, we don't have water shortage issues. We don't have issues that can really justify putting a moratorium in place. Now, the city has from time to time on specific avenues, specific things like sheds, for example. They were concerned about the number of storage units coming and wanted to get their hands around it. So they put a moratorium specifically on that area to provide time to get their hands around it and get the policies in place.
That's because they saw so many storage units coming on. Permits were pulled, and all of a sudden it felt like we were becoming the storage
capital of the area.
Exactly.
Yeah, so in that case, it was very targeted. What I hear people say is, let's just stop it categorically. You really better make the findings, because if not, a judge is going to overturn that. And all you're doing is delaying the inevitable and making the pressures more difficult to deal with, making it more difficult for staff to contend with all the permit requests and all the subdivision requests and all the annexation requests. And so moratoriums are a tool and are used by cities to get their hands around issues when needed. But otherwise, a judge will likely overturn it if you don't have the findings.
It's been so interesting in my lifetime watching the growth. When we moved here, Valley Hills was the new neighborhood in the 80s. My parents moved here in the 70s. And so as Tim Meadows came on, and then we saw the expansion of Mill Road, in the last 5 years, it felt like a lot of the development was happening on the outskirts, the south and the north. We're seeing that building in North Village. I feel like we, as a council, really talked about the concern about downtown not being redeveloped because so much of the growth was happening on the edges. I would say in the early 2000s, there was a lot of approval with Wheeler Park and such to develop on the south end. We had Walmart come in. We saw a lot of the fast food going from 600 South to 1200 South. I really felt like you guided us into realizing if we didn't make a reinvestment into the downtown, we would see those properties diminished. And so we knew that the traffic on Main Street was going to reach a point where it would not be passable. And we're already at a point where we don't recommend any left-hand turns unless you're at an intersection, a lighted intersection. So we've gone back to, again, the playbook, Central Heber, the NVODs. So we've got North Village Overlay Zone, and that really focused on developing the North Village. But then in the last 2 years, you've really focused on downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about why we're focusing on the downtown and some of the plans for Main Street Park and even downtown and why the city's making investments in properties. Walk me through kind of what that process has been over the last 2 years.
Yeah. So we adopted Envision Heber 2050 plan. I think it was April or May of 2020. And one of the things that we heard from the public is they wanted a viable downtown. They wanted a downtown that was a friendly place with great shopping and dining opportunities. They wanted a downtown that had a lot of activities. In fact, I have had dozens of what I'll call old timers come to me and say, now, what do we got to do to get the downtown looking and feeling like the good old days? And the stories they tell me is that prior to about 1970, downtown was a place people went to hang out and to shop and to be seen and to drag. As my understanding, the parade was on Main Street at one time. And so they're longing for those good old days.
The main parade, 2 ways. Same day, both ways.
So we go down one side, turn around, and come back the other.
Yes, because we had a medium in the middle.
No kidding.
So we got to wave, twice.
Wow.
It was great.
Wow.
That was my childhood.
That's cool. That's cool. And downtown should have those types of things. Right. But what happened in the 70s and 80s was Provo Canyon was widened. Hardy's Canyon was approved. People saw that there were more shopping opportunities in Utah County, Park City, University Mall.
That great pole down there.
Yeah. So they took their money and their time to these other communities, and it left our downtown in an awkward state. It transitioned from what it was into what it is, which is a pass-through downtown where people might stop for a burger, a gallon of gas, maybe a cube of ice, for the cooler. And I think people see the potential that at one time was more. We want to see if we can bring that back, that good old feel of a rich, solid, historic community. So it excites me because the greatest opportunity Heber has right now is to re-envision that downtown into something special, to something that resembles what it was 60 years ago, that these old timers talking about all the time, how they miss it so much and how the kids today don't have that same good old time, good old experience. So after we adopted Envision Heber 2050, hearing that feedback, we pivoted into another initiative called Envision Central Heber, which focused on 3 areas. The first was the central neighborhoods on east and west side of Main Street. Secondly, it was Main Street. And the third area was Midway Lane and the area around Heber Valley Railroad, we called our Arts and Recreation District. And through that public process and outreach, we again heard from people. They wanted a downtown that's quaint, that has activities, that has a place that we can call as an extension of our living room. I've heard say that many times. And so the Chamber of Commerce spent $90,000 of their own money, hired a guy named Roger Brooks to come in and look at how we can transition our downtown to what it was traditionally. This guy was hired because he is rolling out. He is an urban planner. He has successfully done this in dozens and dozens and dozens of these thousands of communities. So he laid out a plan for us, and it consisted of improvements to the main park, of what we're calling sometimes as the plaza area. And you see some of the improvements. Phase 1 is done with the transition of 2nd South into a Festival Street, as well as the new main stage. That was phase 1. The public hearings and the outreach we did the last, 3 or 4 weeks is about phase 2, which is the other part of the park. That data from the surveys is being collected now and analyzed, and we presented to the council shortly. But there's even something more exciting I want to tell you about. So you got the main park. We're talking about C Street, which is it says street, but it's the pedestrian alley, similar to Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado, or Duval Street in Key West, Florida. It is a pedestrian alley to take you from 200 South up to Center Street. In conversations with the county, an unparalleled cooperation, the county and city are reimagining what the Tabernacle Block might look like. Well, why are we doing that? Well, as you probably know, the county is building a brand new administration building out on Southfield Road. And that project is either under construction or will be under construction soon. So the questions are coming up. What do we do with the old building downtown that was built, I think, in the late 60s, if I remember correctly? What do we do with it? Last week, we decided to have a consultant consort look at the entire block as it was a blank slate, other than the Tabernacle building and the Social Hall building, and convert it into a large passive park, including ideas such as daylighting the old creek that works its way under the land there, having more space for bikes, more generational trees. Imagine another block in the downtown that is open space and passive park. And now imagine the C Street connecting these two, and they're the bookends for the redevelopment that's going to take place. Hopefully look and feel a lot like what you had in the 50s and the 60s and the 40s. Pretty exciting.
So I'm going to ask you the one question that seems to come up on a lot of people is, where's the funding for a project like this? It feels expensive. Let's talk through how the RAP or the TAP tax is spent, and how impact fees that we've been collecting over the years from these developers that are building on the north and south end. How are those monies helping to assist in developing these projects?
Great question. There's really 4 funding sources that we intend to utilize to see phase 2 take place at the park. Those funding sources include the impact fees. Some of your viewers or listeners may not know what that is, but impact fee is a fee we assess against new development to pay for new infrastructure and new parks that are made necessary by that development. And we just updated our impact fee plan and the projects that are being used to justify the fees that we've assessed. And of course, the main park is one of those projects. And there's been $8 million allocated through the impact fees for that project. Now, those fees have not been collected yet. They'll be collected over a number of years, but that's the first source.
Projected fees can be.
Exactly. The second source is the TAP tax. This was a revenue source that was approved by referendum of the public. I think it's 1/10 of a cent, which is 1 penny for every $10 you spend goes to the TAP tax. That's split between the county, the city, and Midway. And the city intends to use a portion of that on realizing the park improvements in the downtown. The third is grants. We hope to get a lot of grants. And we also hope to have some private monies invested. If you look at some of the plans that Roger Brooks did, we're hoping to have some private monies come in and build some of the shops, sandwich shops and coffee shops. That's part of the plan right now. And probably the last one is the CRA. We do have a CRA in place. We have 2 interlocal agreements with Heber City. Now, that may sound strange to your listeners. Heber City has an interlocal. Yes, we have an interlocal with the agency, the CRA agency. We also have an agreement with the Central Utah Water Conservancy Project, and that is generating a small increment that will also be used for the project. So we don't intend to use property taxes. And I find it interesting because when people think of taxes, they think, man, look at my tax bill. They don't realize that Heber's portion of that is less than 8%. So every property tax dollar you spend, less than 8 cents comes to Heber City. And we don't intend to use property tax. At least my council has not signaled they want to use property taxes for this project.
I think it's important. Again, one of those master plans that we went through while I was on council was a master park plan. And that we hired a consultant to look at all the parks across the city. And it was determined then that they all need different upgrades and new amenities. I know there's been a lot of talk about an all abilities park. And I have to commend you for the Coyote Springs Park.
Isn't that amazing?
It's one of the best parks that I've seen in Heber because it is touching on so many things that people love. The views of Mount Timpanogos. You can sit under pavilion and have lunch. They have a beautiful pond that just gives you that peaceful feeling, hearing that water run. But the playground equipment is, it's fun. It's multi-age. But there's also parks that are being developed by developers. So if you go further into that community, I just noticed this last weekend that there's a new great park in the Jordanelle Ridge that actually is using the slope for the slides. So I think it's important that the community realize that we're not just talking about improvements to Main Street. We're talking about improvements across the board, and really looking back at Wheeler Park, Eagle Park, and at Cove Park, that when they were initially put in, they dropped in a playground that could be anywhere we West Side. Right. They weren't really parks. They were flood zones for the what ifs.
The Coyote Spring Park, in my opinion, is probably the best park in this county. It is the most beautiful, it's perched on hillside. And I was up there a couple weeks ago with the mayor, and she was a beanie because it's just a great project, and it is. And it's our goal, as you mentioned, to build world-class parks because the community told us that's what they want. And so you're going to see Muirfield expansion coming on, and perhaps this year, we're going through some issues on that. You got the Highlands; it's got a huge park in the middle of their project, which will be built in the next year. Potentially the county parcel, the Tabernacle parcel, coming to park, improvements made to the main city park in downtown, and improvements to many of the other parks that were getting tired and need some improvements. We heard from the public, recreation is important to us, and we're now doing something about it.
As we wrap up, I want to hit one topic that has been truly top of mind and top of conversation. That's transportation.
Yep.
Main Street right now feels heavy. We're not even into the summer months where we see a lot of that pass through traffic with campers and recreation is going up to Strawberry or going out to Human Faith. And obviously, the semi trucks have become an issue where we're seeing over 1,000 trucks a day.
Yep.
What's the greater plan for Heber City as far as just increasing access to roads? There's a concern of a lot of people using side streets to avoid Main Street, now putting pressure on residential areas.
Yep.
Can you just give us a hint on what the city's doing to kind of address those issues while we're working with UDOT on the bypass and hopefully having a solution here soon? But we're still years away. What's going to happen in the meantime?
Yeah, well, in the meantime, traffic's still going to grow. There's going to be more traffic pressures. And what we're targeting right now, and again, thanks to the council, they made this a priority of January's retreat, was to identify the key pinch points in the downtown. For example, Troll South, as it comes into the hub, you got it's a 5-lane highway essentially, 2 lanes going east, 2 lanes going south, and the middle lane. But what happens to the traffic that's moving to the west? I'm sorry, not south, but to the west. You'll have traffic that's wanting to turn, make that right-hand turn, and traffic that's wanting to go straight. But what will happen is the light will change. Traffic's wanting to turn, traffic's wanting to go straight. It's backing up. At the toll that seam, that will back up almost to Mill Road. And so we are putting plans together right now to handle that pinch point. We're waiting next year to see what happens with the new high school and how that changes the traffic patterns on 6th South. We believe there's going to be some significant pattern changes there. And once we get our hands around that, we'll make the improvements we need to address, that pinch point. And so it's pinch point by pinch point to try to relieve those acute situations that are occurring.
It's interesting. As you mentioned, traffic patterns change based on behavior. A new shop will go in or the new school. I think it'll be interesting because we're going to see more traffic on 500 North going into that back alleyway of Middle School, and then Midway Lane, a little worse. You're going to see a lot of traffic all there and just pressure on what goes south. So yeah, we've got a lot of things that are going to be changing dynamically in our community. Overall, what's your outlook for Heber City in the next 5 years?
In terms of traffic?
Just in terms of what should we be looking for?
I think you should be looking for additional investments in the downtown, and trying to, if I can, recreate that charming, historic feel look of the downtown where people see it as an extension of the living room. They're proud of it, want to spend time there. People will get hang out. People in the community will hang out where people go. People don't go downtown a lot right now, and we want them to. So you'll see a lot of changes in the downtown. You can see a lot of change to our parks. Coyote Spring Park is a world-class park. You're going to see more of that with the Muirfield expansion, Highlands Park. That's what we're going to make it some of the smaller parks. Don't be surprised about the bypass. Olympics bring a lot of federal money. And I suspect that as we get close to Olympics, there will be more interest politically, not just county and city, but state and federal, to make sure that bypass is likely built. I remember 2002, I was in Energy Santa Clara, and there was a lot of federal money that was pouring in preparation for the Olympics. Now, having said that, even though the bypass could be built before the Olympics, it's still projected there will be more traffic on Main Street. It's not going to get less. It's likely to have more, but it will remove those trucks. It will remove those loud, noisy, dangerous trucks. And you can also look to see more growth in Jordan Ridge. village. Obviously, those things that are approved. You got the Marcellus and Tiger Woods Golf Course. If you've not been up there, go up there. It is the Pebble Beach of the Rocky Mountains. Gorgeous.
Right now, great access through the trail system.
Great access.
Probably not drive your car up.
Trails. I would say the trails are going to be world-class trails. As I mentioned, I walk between 300 to 400 miles a year, and I'm on those trails. They're spectacular. And it's funny, for a lot of years, there weren't a lot of people on those trails. In the Noble Trails is mine, I see people that was like, no, get off my trail, but you'll see more trails, more people on them, enjoy it.
Oh, and on that trail, the Coyote Canyon system in particular, I think so many people use it that they forget that it's private property that is allowed for public assets. And they do get a little bit snippy when the developer makes change and is starting to work on a new pod of homes, and that trail access gets shifted. But I think it's important to recognize that that trail system is part of the agreement, and over 20 miles of trails will be finalized, even though we're seeing a shift in those trails. Again, that's a discussion about change, and change is hard. And a lot of times we don't understand why that change is happening just from a surface level.
But let me speak to trails a little bit more.
Yeah.
You're seeing the new connector trail along Highway 40 go in. You've seen the one on Heritage Farms property go in. The council is now interested in connecting these trails. You're going to see a trail on I think it's 300 south on the west side, connect the park up to where the railroad is. And that's going to tie into the new rail trail that's going in along the railroad and take you into Midway and on down towards the reservoir. And so you now start to see a real effort to get these trails connected, get people from one side of town to the other. I talk a lot about having what's called a trail hub at the railroad. It's kind of like the Penn Station of New York. You go down there, you get on any train you want, or you go to this trail hub, get on any trail you want, whether it's a rail trail, whether it's Atlantis trails, County Springs trails. The trails are going to be a major part of what we do.
Yeah, and big shout out to Mia Yu and Ogbosas Trails Foundation for kind of heading that up, and working on grants and gathering the volunteers to do a lot of that trail work. So it takes a village.
No question.
Yeah. Matt, I have loved this conversation. Just as we wrap up, is there anything you want to share that your experience and just things that you've noticed since moving here to Heber?
Let me leave you with this experience, this anecdote. You might recall the heavy snows we had in the winter of 23. It was record snows, in fact, even more snow than it was in the 83 snow season. And we saw a very rapid warming in the spring, and the projections were flooding. The creeks were going to peak and flood. And we put a call out to people to fill sandbags and to place those sandbags on Center Street from about Midway Lane clear to the west to about, I think it was 6 West. And what I remember is we call out. We didn't have tens. We had hundreds of people. And they brought that pioneer grit. They brought that pioneer stock, and I love it because there were people wanting to get things done, and they did. That was awesome.
This community definitely stepped up when they're asked.
Yep.
And so I appreciate that. I was there. My husband and I were filling sandbags at the city facility and county facility. So it is true. I mean, that we're a community of volunteers. We're a community that shows up. We also see that on the other end, though, when there's frustration, we see the community step up as well. So I just appreciate your time this morning, with your leadership. I don't think a lot of people realize the amount of hours that you're spending on a weekly basis, monthly, just over the last many years. But you've always had that door opening. You're willing to engage, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
So as we wrap up, I just, again, want to thank you for your work and for your vision for Heber City. It's always helpful for residents to really better understand your role, the role of the city council and those elected officials, and how decisions are made and how our community is being planned for, that it does take years. My frustration with government is sometimes it takes a little bit longer than my patience has, but it's important to get it right. And this was the guidebook. We have other master plans that are really setting the stage for how we're moving our city forward. And I would encourage anyone that doesn't understand to take the time to do the research, to meet with their elected officials, yourself. There's a lot of people that are willing to sit down and listen and discuss those issues that we're seeing. But as our listeners, and to so many that have joined us for this episode. I just want to thank you. This really is the place where we're celebrating the people, the ideas, and the stories that are shaping our lives here in the Heber Valley. So, Rachel Kahler with the Community Alliance for Main Street. Again, thank you, Matt Brower, our Oklahoma City manager, for being here. And we'll catch you again next time.